taking notes from nobody.
Jaylen Brown.
Your superstars have off games.
Follow us on social media at Celtics Talk Weekly.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into Celtics Postgame Live. I am your host, Robbie Tane. I am with my co-host over here, Seamus, aka Celtics Every Day. Ian Angelo will be joining us very shortly. Boston Celtics win their fifth straight in Orlando, 116-83. Celtics extend their winning streak to 5 games, which is the longest of the season. And I want to say in a long time, I believe the longest winning streak since last year around April. The Celtics looking pretty good here, Seamus, catching 5 games. They are currently tied for the 6th seed. Will play in Brooklyn with Harden, Kyrie, and KD, less Brooklyn Nets for the tiebreaker in that 6th seed spot. Although, before we get into that game and what to expect there, we got some stuff to talk about from Orlando. So, Seamus, we do this every show. Your thoughts, your opinions, what you liked, what you didn't like, and from Orlando tonight.
Well, from my my other location here tonight, the Celtics, they took care of business. Is the bottom line here. They didn't look particularly good on offense at times tonight, but again, defensively, they're still an elite basketball team on that end of the floor, and they showed it tonight down in Orlando, and they ultimately got the job done, and it was without headache at the end with the young guys now able to close this game out, aside from the game we saw on Friday against the Pistons, where got a little dicey there at the end, despite the Celtics mainly blowing out the Pistons for most of the night. We thought coming into Detroit and Orlando, these would be 2 wins for the Celtics, and those were the results that happened. And at the end of the day, this stretch coming up, these next 4 games, this is a real test of what the Celtics are made of. We beat a lot of bad teams lately, and we've looked really good while doing it. But we're going on the road for the next 2 of the next 4, I believe. And all 4 opponents are going to be playoff teams, are projected to be playoff teams in some fashion this year. And that's going to be the real test for the Celtics moving forward. And these last 2 games, they were kind of a bundle of games here to get right, right games, even though we are on a 5-game winning streak. But these are confidence builders. These are obviously record builders as well. We're tied for the 6th seed in the East right now, and heading into this next stretch, that's huge because as the trade deadline looms, this team actually looks to be turning somewhat of a corner.
Yeah, I think that you look at these past 5 games, no team really that you look at and think title contention or really playoff caliber team. Played up a couple banged up teams, but like you said, it's record boosters, and the Celtics have really kind of been digging themselves out of a hole ever since the start of January due to that just horrendous December they had where they fell a victim of a tough schedule, 6-9 on the month. However, the Celtics currently undefeated in February, 3-0, mind you. Game against Charlotte, Gordon Hayward-less, so win's still a win. Detroit and Orlando, obviously, but I think things are definitely looking up for the Celtics. We want to talk about trade deadlines and trades. I do think Boston still should target a shooter without a question. I do think that's should be an area of concern for Brad Stevens. I mean, if you look at the box score tonight, Boston shot 13 of 46, 28.3% from beyond the arc, which is horrendous. You really can't do that. I mean, you can against an Orlando Magic team when you hold the other team to 5 of 26. You can get away with it. Obviously, Celtics providing and showing just amazing a defensive effort. Holding a team to 83 points is not easy. So, props to the Celtics there. I think Jaylen Brown was great. Obviously, led all scorers, 26. Robert Williams continuing to impress. Only really played 27 minutes, but had 10.6 rebounds. And then Grant Williams doing Grant Williams things off the bench, 12 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, along with the steal on the block. Schroder, we don't know how much longer he's going to be around, but, he gave us 22 as well. So I think overall it's a building block game if we want to backtrack to the first 10 games of the season, like you said. But yeah, I think that if you were to tell me a month and a half ago that the Boston Celtics would be 5 games over 500, looking at the 6th spot, only really 3.5 games back from 3rd, I'd call you crazy. So I do think I applaud the Celtics because they've been winning these games in blowout fashion, which is kind of how you want to see the Celtics take care of business against these lower end teams.
Yeah, and that was kind of the problem during the last stretch. I know we had a pretty, hefty schedule in December in terms of opponents and good opponents. But at the beginning of January there, we had the Knicks, the Pacers, we played the Magic at home, and all those games, we were not pulling those games out in the fashion in which we wanted to see the Celtics pull them out in, and that is blowout fashion. And we came out with some good wins, and also came out with a bad loss against the Knicks. Almost came out with another bad loss against the Pacers. But now you fast forward to this stretch we've had these last 5 games, and particularly these last 2 games against bad teams, and we've handled them like we are the better team. And that is what is supposed to happen when you have the more talented team on a nightly basis, which the Celtics do typically have on most nights. They're probably a top 15, I don't know, I guess you wouldn't say top 12 in talent. It's all about fit, obviously, at the end of the day for the Celtics and, how well they can shoot on some nights. But in terms of talent, they have a really talented roster. And on some nights, they're just not bringing it all to the table. But as we've seen it as of late on this 5-game winning streak, it's starting to come together a little bit more. A little bit more of a core is being established, I would say, a little bit more of a rhythm over these last 5 games and even this last month, I would say. Ever since Smart came back into the lineup and Dennis Schroeder's minutes were cut, that's when you really started to see the change. That was the real thing that developed in December, that Marcus Smart, Dennis Schroeder, they're not going to fit well together. They're not going to coexist in the same lineup together next to Brown and Tatum. And since Dennis Schroeder's minutes have gone down, Smart came back into the lineup, and now you have 7-8 guys that Ime goes to minus Dennis Schroeder that are playing on a consistent basis, unlike in November and December where we just saw, lineup shifts all over the place. That's what really has changed this Celtics team. And it would be nice to see them go out at the trade deadline and actually build onto this, because we see the hole. It's shooting right now.
Yeah.
Playmaking, that's more of a question for the offseason, in my opinion. I know it's something that we eventually need. We need our true point guard of the future. That isn't really Marcus Smart. But for right now, for this year, with this roster, it's about getting a shooter and upgrading moving forward, because we actually have a shot to build something here at the end. I know we might not be title contenders still, considering Golden State and Phoenix are so strong. However, you look at our situation, we're trying to build something here for Brown and Tatum for over the summer or even later on down the line to go get a third star. And you don't want to be middling, with these guys under contract. You don't want to be continuously middling throughout the, development of their prime. You want to be contending. You want to be competing. You want to be building a culture here. And adding a shooter at the deadline, improving the roster, and hopefully finishing within the top 6, which is totally a possibility at this point. That builds something here. Go into the playoffs. Hopefully you're competitive in round 1, maybe even make it to round 2. Hopefully that could happen. You never know. But if you upgrade the roster and do that's a really good thing moving forward in terms of culture building and just building a good vibe here around Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, something that has not been here for the past year and a half.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, you go back to a month and a half, end of December, and you say, hey, right before that Suns game, hey guys, this Celtics team actually has a shot to maybe make a little bit of noise, maybe sneak into the top 5, hold that 6th spot, not have to play a play-in game. I think you'd call Celtics fans crazy if someone said that. But obviously Ian did just join us. Ian, we do this every show. Thoughts, opinions, positive, negatives on tonight's win in Orlando.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty good to see. I mean, the Celtics are now 5 games over 500. They've won 5 in a row. Granted, it hasn't been against the highest level of competition in the league, but it's still pretty impressive to see the Celtics make a run like this when we thought it was just going to be another middling season like it was last season. It's nice to see them actually come together and play like a team. I will say, though, I have a little cause for concern. I don't think it's that big a deal, and I was wondering if I could talk about this and ask about you guys what you thought about it. It's kind of a little I don't know if it's concerning or not, but it's a little concerning seeing the Celtics struggle a little bit shooting against the Pistons and the Magic. More the Magic than anything. I'm not saying this is going to be a consistent trend or anything, but it's a tad bit concerning seeing them shooting
Yeah.
a little worse than they normally do against the worst teams in the league. But I can't complain too much. For as bad as a game that Tatum had shooting, his playmaking has been off the charts
Yeah,
as of recently. That's a big reason why the Celtics are going on this run that they are. Tatum and Brown are starting to play make a lot more than they were before. And, maybe Tatum won't score 30, 40 points in that game. He's going to have 9 rebounds and 7 assists. So that's pretty crazy. It's pretty nice to see right now.
Yeah, I think this has kind of been the first stretch of basketball the Celtics kind of have to get a chance to kind of play within their unit, within that starting five, and that Schroder Richardson duo off the bench. Like I said, we don't know how long Schroder is going to be in Boston for. Grant has been phenomenal, very consistent. In terms of the shooting thing, I mean, it's hard not to agree with that. How Brad wants to approach that, I don't know. I don't know if I saw a report today, Celtics looking into Kobe White in Chicago. I don't know, if I know the Pacers are going to be sellers now. They've shown with the LeVert trade. You still got guys like Jeff Green on the market. So I don't know what, in that terms of a trade aspect, but I've been a broken record in our group chat, guys, on a certain player that's playing in Maine that has been shooting lights out that for some strange reason hasn't been called up to the Celtics roster yet, and that's Sam Hauser. And I know he might not be NBA ready, and I know there's a lot that goes into an NBA game, but if Brad can't find a move come the deadline that he likes or that he doesn't want to really mess up what the Celtics have going, you move a guy like Sam Hauser and play him 10, 15 minutes in place of your Freedoms or Cantors with the minutes he was eating up. I think you could potentially see a guy like, look at all the great shooters in the league right now. Guys like Duncan Robinson, guys like Joe Harris, they kind of have that upbringing of they have to prove themselves in the G League, or they prove themselves, they kind of know names, and then they check in the games and they're spot up shooters. And I think the Celtics have a shooter in there that what could be their guy already on their roster. They just got to give him a chance. We've seen with Garrison Matthews, and we've seen that story before. And who's the guy? Max Strus out in Miami. We've seen the Celtics have some solid shooters. We just never let them breathe from the G League. So I think, you let Hauser play, give him some minutes.
I think it's funny that you say that about Duncan Robinson because, you can probably look back on the podcast we had. I think it was like right before the season started. Didn't we compare him to Duncan Robinson when we were talking about him the first time? When he got signed, we talked about him being potentially could be a Duncan Robinson.
Yeah, and you see him in the G League. He scored 30 points a day, 5 for 9 shooting from 3. The guy can shoot, and obviously there's struggle shooting. Like I said, as to the Schroder trade, I kind of want to hear what Seamus on his approach to that is. Me, personally, I think Brad's going to try to find the best offer right before maybe day or two before the deadline, and then kind of take it. I don't know where he's going to go, playmaking, shooting, big man, I don't know. But for me, you ask me, solution to the Celtics shooting problem, you don't want to mess up chemistry. You don't want to cause any, changes that have to be made. You call up Sam Hauser.
Yeah, I would say the reason Sam Hauser is not in the league right now is probably because of the defensive end of the ball. But you do make a compelling argument with his shooting and other shooters who have come up that same way. And like you said, we've already missed out on 2 of them, Max Strus and Garrison Matthews. Both of those guys are lighting it up in other places right now. Can't really make the same mistake if that does happen with Sam Hauser. He's in our system. But in regards to, you mentioned the Schroder situation right now for the Celtics, shifting to that point, Dennis Schroder in this trade deadline, on one hand, I think the Celtics are going to just dump him for nothing. I think they're going to dump him for 2 second-round picks, preferably 2 second-round picks in between years 2023 and 2027, because we do not have a second-round pick throughout those years at all from various trades we've made in the past year and a half. So I think that is definitely a possibility. I think you're probably looking at, again, that Troy Brown and a second-round pick for Dennis Schroder from Chicago. Milwaukee had an offer on the table. Who knows what that really looks like at this point? It could be Rodney Hood, who has really just fallen off a cliff. at this point in his career. Rodney Hood and a second for Dennis Schroder. That's a possibility, but those are kind of just dumping Schroder moves right there. You're not really getting anything that great in return. And I do think that he will be sold because the team will try to dip the tax. However, however, if you're looking at the Celtics situation right now, you know, is it really better to have Troy Brown in a second over Schroeder if you're
Yeah.
trying to make some sort of push? Even if you think that Schroeder and Smart don't fit together, you could totally cut Schroeder's minutes
Yeah.
and only use them in situations in which you feel is necessary. Now, is that totally fair to Schroeder? No, but he is under contract at the end of the day. I think they're going to dump him at the deadline unless some crazy deal comes around and they actually are able to get something for him. But at the end of the day, I think the team is going to try to dip under the tax. That's a little, you know, from a fan perspective, it's never exciting to hear, oh yeah, team, we're trying to get under the tax, but that's just kind of the reality of the situation. We don't have, no offense to Whit Grosbeck and our ownership here, but we don't have ownership like Steve Ballmer where, they added what 9 million, 19 million, 20 million dollars in luxury tax money with that Norman Powell trade. And they're not winning the championship this year because they don't have Leonard and Paul George there. They don't care because he's willing to pay the tax, and that is such a minuscule amount of his money. Boston, not the same situation. You don't want to get yourself into the repeater tax later on down the line, and you just want to have flexibility moving forward. So I think they're going to dump Schroeder. It's unfortunate to say. I would like to, personally, if I was on their end, I understand what they're doing. I would like to get something for him. Just please, can we get something for a real asset? We signed this guy thinking that if he isn't going to add to the team, he's going to be an asset. And now we're just going to flip him for a couple of seconds. That's kind of meh. It's kind of
Yeah.
meh.
Well, I think these next 3 games, 4 games, I'd say, I don't like I said, Brooklyn, no Harden, no KD, no Kyrie. You don't really look at that game as a obviously big implications, so it's got to come to play. But it's not
Well,
real.
go ahead.
Oh,
Is Harden a net by that game?
yeah, that's another. I mean, we don't even know. Like, it's a lot of factors that play into that Brooklyn situation. I mean, they've lost 8 in a row. They dropped a big one against Denver, who Boston will be seeing on Friday. But you know, my point is that I think in regards, the Celtics have 2 more games before the deadline. I think that uh, there's not really an opportunity to see against a big time matchup if Schroeder is worth keeping. So I think Brad kind of has to guess. Listen, if the Celtics say they beat Brooklyn, they're 6 games over 500, they're in that playoff spot. Seamus, you make a great point. Maybe you just ride them out. If you can't get you can't. What Troy Brown? I mean, is that really going to help you in the long run? Is that second round pick really worth it? Or do you roll the dice? You run. What's the saying? Roll the dice. We'll say that. You're 6 games over. You're making some noise. See what this group of guys can do. You might lose Schroeder in the offseason if he doesn't want to, take a contract dump and come back to Boston, which probably he will do, is leave. But like I said, Celtics are not out of this, and with the way if they can maintain this defensive efficiency and maybe flip Neesmith, I hate to say it, get Neesmith out of here. Maybe just get a guy that can shoot. You're seeing guys like Powell, Norman Powell and Robert Covington and Karis LeVert are being sold for so cheap. You call up call those guys up. You got trade exceptions. Just get us a shooter, and maybe this team can make some noise. And if they don't, you got some cap flexibility. You have some assets to make some moves in the offseason. You know exactly what you need. Ian, you made a phenomenal point. Jason Tatum's playmaking has definitely taken a leap, and you noticed it in the past 10 games. So if you ask me, if I'm getting Troy Brown in a second-round pick or keeping Schroeder for the rest of the year, I'm going to roll with Schroeder, play him 25 minutes, keep him on a separate line from Smart, and just roll the dice. I mean, Boston really is officially they have entered. It really will happen if they can beat Brooklyn, but they have kind of entered the conversation here of contending, not contending for the title, but contending for a top 5 Eastern Conference playoff spot. They'll be 3.5 games back from first, 2 games back from a top 3 spot if they can beat Brooklyn. So, I mean, the Celtics have taken care of business, and it could potentially be real this time. So if it is, I say you hold on to Schroder.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of tough to think about because, not even a month ago, we were all thinking, like, oh, Schroder is obviously gone. There's no way we don't keep him past the
Well,
trade deadline.
that's sorry to interrupt you, Ian, but that might still be the point here.
Yeah.
He might legitimately be gone. Does that make it okay or not? That's
yeah.
Because if, I said, you got something going. At what point do you say, well, short 20 minutes of Schroeder is better than Troy Brown in the second rounder? So
yeah, I mean, Troy Brown is not a good basketball player. Comparing, if I had to take Dennis Schroeder or Troy Brown, I would take Dennis Schroeder. Yeah. But I heard like they had like two options. It was either the Bucks or the Bulls. Now, if we can get a guy like Pat Connaughton from the Bucks, I don't think that's going to happen. But either that or Dante DiVincenzo, if that's actually what the Bucks are offering, then I say we would go with that if that was actually what they were offering. But if they're not offering like one of those guys or Kobe White from the Bulls, then I don't really see us trading him now because of how good that he actually has been playing with this team. He hasn't had amazing games all the time, but tonight he was basically the sole reason why our offense actually started rolling.
Yeah.
He had 22. And I mean, he just was a scoring machine off the bench. 22 points in 20 minutes. I'd take that over anything that Troy Brown has to offer. No offense to Troy Brown, but
I think that the Celtics, what they need to do is they got to call up these teams that are selling, right? Like the Kings are selling, the Pacers are selling. The Blazers, mind you, they're kind of thin on what they're selling. They kind of already dumped what they wanted to get rid of, but teams are trying to avoid the luxury tax. So if I'm Brad, I'm seeing, Nesmith doesn't have a whole lot of value, but you give up Nesmith, a future first and a future second, and you can get a guy like Harrison Barnes, or you can get a guy like Malcolm Brogdon, who for the Celtics would be huge. And, the teams don't want to take on that money and because they're not in the situation. So for me, I don't think your trade value is within Dennis Schroeder. You're not going to get an upgrade with Dennis Schroeder. You're not going to, Kobe White isn't realistic for Dennis Schroeder, and Pat Connaughton, those guys, just due to the fact that he's only got 30 games, 40 games left to play on his contract, and then he enters the market. So personally, I'm Brad. I'm calling up teams. I'm offering Nesmith. I'm throwing Pritchard. I'm throwing Langford out there. I'd give up some picks. I'm rolling with Schroeder as much as I think his play is inconsistent. I think that if the Celtics are going to make a little bit of a run here, I think Schroeder is a good backup point guard. If in the right situation, I'm focused on getting a shooter, and I'm letting this team kind of just run the table and see what they can do. Maybe make some noise. You got the net, you got the banged up Nets, and then two home games against Nuggets and Hawks. You could be looking at what, an 8-game win streak from Boston. When was the last time we ever heard that? It's probably been 2 years since we've done that. So
probably. I mean, it's been rough, honestly. But yeah, I think shooting has to be their number one priority. It has to be. There's no way Brad Stevens can get out of this trade deadline without at least getting some sort of shooting. I don't really care who it is, man. If we have to call up Sam Hauser, then screw it. Let Sam Hauser run for 15, 20 minutes. I don't really care. This team needs another shooter. And we can't rely on our bench guys all the time. Josh Richardson played really well against who was it? The Hornets, right? Where he was like 6 of 8 from 3 or something. Tonight he was like 0 of 7. So, we can't bank on our bench guys always being there to shoot. So if we can get a guy who's established as a shooter, that's going to be the most important thing for this trade deadline.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, and the most important part of doing that is finding that guy out on the market for the right price. And there's potentially there's a potential scenario in which that's not the case. Every trade deadline season, every time I always come back on this point after the whole trade deadline fiasco is done. Once you're looking in hindsight, it's always how many players were legitimately available for the right price, because I think a lot of teams do overvalue their assets, and especially at this time of year when things are very tentative with teams during their season. It's very, where are we going? Where are we truly going this season? Like you see a team like the Cavs, they're clearly picking a direction which they're going right now. They're going to the top of the East right now, or trying to, at least, with that trade today for Karis LeVert. And then you see on the other end of the spectrum where the Blazers are going. They're completely selling, and you saw Norman Powell and Robert Covington moved for absolutely nothing. Now, you mentioned it in regards to Dennis Schroder, keeping him around. And we bring up I always bring up well, they want to dip under the luxury tax line, and Dennis Schroder is $5.9 million contract. If you ship that away for nothing, easily does that because we're $3 million over the line. Easy math, obviously. $5 million contract for $3 million over, get rid of it, $2 million under. But there's also a world in which we have other guys on very minor contracts that we could move for essentially nothing and still get under that line while attaining Dennis Schroder, or moving him for something of a little bit more value with, say, somebody else like an Aaron Nesmith or Romeo Langford, or maybe even Peyton Pritchard at this point, if, the value is there in him, which probably not.
No.
But you could move a guy like Ennis Freedom. That doesn't get you under the tax. But say you move a guy like him, salary dump him, Bol, PJ Dozier. All those guys are not really, everybody's so excited about Bol and PJ Dozier. He could be potentially an upgrade next season if we do keep him and his bird rights into next season. That could be a good addition for us. But ultimately this season, they're not bringing anything to the team. And Bol, he's really a two-way player at this point. He's so raw in his career, and he's so injury prone at this point that I just don't know how much we're going to actually see of him in Boston. But if you could move a couple of guys like that, automatically get yourself under the luxury tax line. And even I believe Bobby Marks mentioned it a couple of weeks ago after Boston made that Juancho trade. Jaylen Brown has a couple of incentives that he is not likely to meet this season. He's not going to be an all-star. I believe he only has to miss 3 or 4 more games to not make the 65 game threshold because of all the games he missed earlier. So if he misses out on, I believe it's $2 or $3 million in incentives, that dips the line even lower for the Celtics and puts them in a way better spot. So there's multiple other scenarios. Bottom line, there's multiple other scenarios for the Celtics to get under the tax line. But right now, the main one that is being talked about is moving Dennis Schroder for absolutely nothing. And that's just the easy cop-out answer. But there are other ways the Celtics can go and dip under the tax.
Yeah, I think the thing Brad needs to think about and decide is whether or not he thinks this team is serious in terms of they can hold what they're doing, if they can actually withstand a run and continue to win games. Personally, I'm not gonna say that we're officially, there and we're officially, I mean, we are kind of officially there, but like I said, we've had some easy matchups. We've beaten the Pistons and the Magic and, the Heat without their kind of key guys. Mind you, we've played games like that this year, but it's I'm not fully convinced. I want to see how we play against these. I think the Nuggets, Hawks, Sixers stretch is a big one. I wonder if I'd love to see 2-1 there. But with that being said, I do think that the Celtics have put themselves in a very, very good spot approaching the All-Star break. And I think that their confidence, you see them playing with a little bit more confidence. I think that the chemistry is going up a little bit. And like I said, a month ago, you mean to tell me we're going to be 5 games over 500, in the playoffs? I would, I'm a broken record.
I would have been thinking you were crazy if we were like 3 games over 500, because over this win streak, it was the first time we were 3 games over 500 the whole season.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh my God.
and we have had some hiccups. You got to think we don't blow that 25-point lead to the Knicks back in January, and we take care of business against Portland like we should have. We're looking at what 32.
We don't blow a lot of leads. We're like number 1 in the East at this point.
Yeah, but you're looking at 32 and 23, and then guess what? We're only a game back from 5th. So that, it's really close here. There's a lot of room to move up. But mind you, there's also a lot of chances to move down in the standings. So the Celtics do have to lock in here. They got some tough games. Confidence is going up, but deadline, Celtics got to make a move for a shooter. I don't think it's possible to sustain the Celtics number. I mean, we shoot some of the worst. I think the worst shooting percent. We're up there for the worst shooting percentage in the league. Mind you, our defense has been phenomenal, holding teams to under 100 points almost every single night at this point. However, you gotta get a shooter because there's going to be some games where it gets ugly, and if you walk into the gym against a team like the Charlotte Hornets or a team like the Pacers, who can just kill you. And mind you, the Pacers going in a different direction this season, but like the Clippers or someone like that, you walk in and shoot 30% from the three, they're gonna run you out of the gym, and I think the Celtics, they can't let that happen.
Yeah, and I think this stretch too. We get excited over this stretch and we're moving up to sixth, and we should be to a certain extent now that the Celtics are finally getting their shit together a little bit. However, last year we did have a similar stretch like this one at the end of the season. It was a 6-game winning streak in April. We mentioned it earlier in the show. And the Celtics, they went to 31-26 after that 6-game winning streak. They finished the season 36-36. They went 5-10 over the last 15 games of the season. And I will say that this year's team is more talented than last year's team. So there should be more of an expectation for this team to finish out the season a little bit stronger, especially against some lesser opponents, because we had that, just ridiculous December schedule. It fit in all of our tough opponents into that month, it seemed like. So we're going to be finishing with a lesser schedule. I would expect the Celtics to finish better this season, not a 5-10 record or what. We have more than 15 games left, but better win percentage than that to end out the season. However, they have to go out there and prove it, because up to this point we've beaten a lot of bad teams, but we've seen it so many times where we play good quality playoff teams, and particularly late in games, we just don't know how to close out. And that's going to be the next step still for the Celtics before they really prove it. And they really prove that this year they're serious to make some sort of run. Maybe not for the championship, probably not for the championship, but some sort of run that builds something here going into next year.
Yeah. We got a chance. I mean, like I said, there's I kind of, if you listen to the post-game shows, I mean, in January, I'd say, the door's cracked open. Are they gonna actually finally kind of get in there and, make the run? Or back in, before December, I'd say there's a chance, the Celtics have an opportunity. Are they going to finally answer to the call? I've said it. I mean, how many times have I said it, guys? If the Celtics are serious about getting in the standings, they need to go on a big time winning streak. I mean, I feel like I've said it like a million times. So, like I said, great that we're winning games, not against necessarily amazing opponents, but wins are wins. We're blowing them out. It's been a season full of disappointment and negative talk, so it feels good to kind of come onto the show and have a sense of we're doing something right. Caesar,
I think it's called hope. Rob.
Hope.
I know it's been a while since you felt this.
Yeah, I know.
And I think it's called hope, and I mean, we can only take as much stock as we can. We did just play the Magic and the Pistons, and the Heat and the Hornets weren't extremely healthy at the time we played them either. But, I mean, you have to be somewhat happy with how they've played. I mean, they haven't fallen apart, like, completely yet. So that's always a good sign. And, I mean, granted, we don't talk about the Pistons game, which I wish me and Seamus talked about more, that ending where Dwayne Casey just, like, absolutely decided that he was just going to go beast mode and play all the starters until the last minute, but whatever. But it's nice to see the Celtics actually playing well, and I mean, you never know what can happen when it comes to the playoffs. Like last year, untimely injuries could pop up again. Hopefully, I mean, I don't wish injuries on anybody, but what if you end up playing, let's just say you're the 6th seed and you play the Cavaliers as the 3 seed. What if Evan Mobley goes down? You might have a chance next round. Maybe you play Miami and Jimmy Butler's not there. Just something out of the ordinary like that something happens, which I don't think injuries are going to happen that much. But, I mean, you never know with the Celtics. So, who knows? Maybe we'll see another Eastern Conference Finals appearance again.
Yeah, well, mind you, defense wins games in the playoffs, and the Celtics, have a very good defensive team. But shooting, you got to get a shooter. Or I'm gonna keep. I mean,
100%.
until
With our offense, there's no way we're getting to the
Yeah.
Eastern Conference Finals.
But
Yeah. that is the, sorry to interrupt you, Rob, but that is the main problem, because in the playoffs, when everything shifts to a half court offense, that's when the Celtics are terrible.
Yeah.
They need to play with pace on a nightly basis to actually be good. And we're going to see more pace in the playoffs in general this year, just because everybody is playing with a more heightened pace at this point in time. And it's just a thing that is spread around the league in recent years. However, the playoffs, there's more half court offense in the playoffs. And that is where the Celtics particularly struggle on most nights. And that is why, the whole, I don't know if you guys, see the conversations on Twitter or wherever, where people are complaining about Dennis Schroder rolling the ball up court. That should drive people crazy, because he's not pushing the pace by doing that. And I don't know when's the last time he did that, but things like that, just the Celtics not playing with a sense of urgency at times, that's what can kill them. Them not playing with a sense of urgency that, hey, we have to come out here, play with pace. We have to come out here with some energy tonight. Those are the things that sink the team, along with the whole shooting fiasco. Them in the half-court offense, them shooting, and them not having a sense of urgency on how to play on a nightly basis really just ruins them. And that is something moving forward that, like I said, we can both improve at the deadline. And then just philosophically, I say we have been improving it since the beginning of January, about the midway point of January. But that's still something moving forward that the Celtics have to get legit about before they really want to make a legitimate run.
Yeah, now I got a couple stats here before we close out the show on the Celtics in 2022, the new year. So the Celtics have their top 5 biggest marginal wins of the season. 4 out of the 5 of them have come in the new year, 2022. 53 against Sacramento, which is the highest. Tonight, 33 at Orlando, which is the second highest. 30 versus Miami on January 31st. 29 against Washington on January 23rd. And 24 against the Knicks on January 8th. So the Celtics are dominating their opponents in this new year. And also, Celtics are first in net rating in the new year, first in defensive rating in the new year, have a 13-6 record. Tatum averaging 26 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists. Brown averaging 25 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists. Obviously, those assist numbers are right around plus 1.5 for Brown and plus 2 for plus 2 for Brown and plus 1.5 for Tatum, where they normally are. So, those are some positive signs here for Celtics fans. 7 games over 500 in the new year. Brown and Tatum clicking. We're blowing teams out. There's a little bit of hope, like Ian says. You don't get that a lot with the Celtics, but some positive hope. Guys, before we close out the show, last comments, last remarks, what we thinking for the next game up against Brooklyn on Tuesday?
Just win.
Just go and take
care of
business.
Just win.
I am looking forward. So no Kevin Durant, no Kyrie Irving, because Brooklyn is at home. Brooklyn is at home. They don't have Kyrie. And potentially no James Harden, because he's either A, dealing with a hamstring issue, or B, holding out because he knows he's getting traded this week. Who knows? Anyway, the Brooklyn Nets are an absolute mess. I'm loving every single second of it, as everyone should probably know here, that the Nets, they're an absolute mess. I'm looking forward to us going into Brooklyn, kicking their ass, and I'm guaranteeing another win here. I guaranteed this win today. And now here it comes on Tuesday against the Nets. I'm guaranteeing a Celtics win. The Nets have who? Kessler Edwards? No offense to them. They have Patty Mills. Who's beating us on Tuesday? Who's there for the Nets?
Blake Griffin? Vaccinated just before the Celtics game.
Yeah, all right.
Versus the Celtics.
No, but this I totally expect on Tuesday the win streak to be extended to 6 games, and the Nets losing streak to be extended to 9 games. 9.
That's crazy how far they've fallen.
9.
Yeah, it's
insane.
Things
and there's
are
really no end in sight.
Yeah, things are going south for Brooklyn, but they're heading north for Boston. But guys, thank you so much for tuning into Celtics Postgame Live. It was super fun talking Celtics. Boston extends their winning streak to 5 as they beat the Orlando Magic 116-83 in blowout fashion. Like we said, they head to Brooklyn to finish this little 3-game road trip. On Tuesday night, we will be having you guys fully covered, post-game show after that game. And then the Celtics come back home for a nice little 2-game homestand. I'm Rob. That's Seamus. Below me is Ian. And we thank you guys so much for watching.